The Sony FX6 is an awesome camera. However, in this video, I'm going to give you 6 reasons why I think the FX3 is even better. Now, recently I worked on a shoot with a Sony FX6. In fact, we had 2 of them on the shoot, and it was a really interesting shoot being able to use them and test them out compared to the FX3. And I have to say, after actually using them in hand, as well as doing other research and thinking about picking one up at some point, I've decided that I think actually the FX3 is actually a better camera overall. The first reason why I think the FX3 is better is simply down to the codecs that the cameras can actually shoot. The FX6 has stuck to pretty much the same codecs as the FX5 and FX7 were able to do, which are great. However, they haven't really advanced much. They're still quite large. If you want to shoot long op, you have to shoot in 8-bit, which is really frustrating when you want to try and save some space while still getting the best quality out of your camera. Meanwhile, in the FX3, you've got access to all those extra codecs like FX6, which is an awesome codec and just gives you so many more options when it comes to bit rates and obviously much smaller file sizes. And you've got the future codecs of HS as well in there, so you can even get smaller file sizes or even better quality without sacrificing on bit depth or bit rate. Second up is the overall size of the camera. Now, the FX6 isn't a big camera, but it's certainly nowhere near as small as the FX3. Now, I've done a whole other video where I've talked about why I think the FX3 is the perfect cinema camera. Its size is one of the big reasons for that. It's just so versatile. You can always build this camera up. If you need it rigged out, if you need a bit more weight and inertia behind it, or extra battery life, then there's plenty of rigging options that you can do with this camera. However, the fact you can get it so tiny and so lightweight, you can easily shoot with this anywhere. If you just want to travel with it and you don't want to grab people's attention, then suddenly it can look like a really small, compact camera that anyone could be shooting with, but you're shooting cinema level quality from this tiny little body. The small size also means it's much easier and better to use on a gimbal. The FX6, although can be balanced on a Ronin RS3, for example, it is a bit of a struggle. It really is pushing the limits and you have to take everything off. It means you lose things like audio, and that can just be really frustrating. However, with the FX3, you can stick it on a gimbal and it really is so small and lightweight. You can even start adding larger lenses and really getting some dynamic shots that just would not be possible with the FX6. Third up is the fact that it has in-body stabilization for the sensor. Now, some people will say that a proper cinema camera really doesn't need this, and I would argue that's not true. In-body stabilization is really important. We used to have an FS5, so it's the same body size as the FX6, and that thing was shaky. If you did anything above 50mm without stabilization on the lens, you would see noticeable shake. Now, of course, you can rig it up even more, make it heavier, and you'll get rid of a lot of that shake, but you could do the same with the FX3 as well if you really wanted to. Having built-in stabilization for me is more important than having built-in ND. Having both would be amazing. It's something that I hope one day Sony can do. In-body stabilization just allows you to get those shots that you just wouldn't be able to otherwise without a tripod, gimbal, or some sort of rig. It really does make a difference in terms of the quality of the videos you can produce. And to be honest, to most clients, that's what they want. Yes, there can be certain issues with in-body stabilization where the image can shift unexpectedly and that doesn't look great and it can be frustrating. That's really not an issue that often. And I think for most shots you would do for a client, actually having somewhat of a stabilized shot in camera is more important than worrying about the occasional time that maybe the in-body stabilization might mess up. The fourth reason why I think the FX3 is better is the fact that you actually can record audio directly into the camera without needing the top handle. With the FX6, unfortunately, there is no audio input on the body of the camera itself. Instead, you just got the XLR inputs on the top handle. So if you decide to remove that, say using on a gimbal, or you just want to pack the camera down a little bit, you've just lost that ability, and that is just so frustrating. With the FX3, even if you're not using the top handle, you still have the 3.5mm jack on the side. Fifth, something that I always talk about, but not many other people do, and that is the power that this camera actually consumes and how it uses it. Battery life, of course, isn't as good on an FX3 compared to an FX6, using those much larger batteries that it uses. However, the convenience of powering this camera is much better. You can power an FX3 via USB-C. You can charge the batteries inside the camera if you wish. There's many more charging options as well for the batteries that can all be powered off USB. And for me, when you're traveling a lot, that is such a useful thing to have. When you're using a camera like the FX6 that uses much larger batteries and needs to use a certain charger, that can just be really frustrating. If that charger were to break, you have no way of actually charging up your batteries through your camera, and that could be devastating for a shoot. For me, all cameras in the sub 10K bracket, I think moving forward should have the ability to be powered off USB-C power delivery, whether it's charging the batteries on a separate unit or actually in the camera itself. The technology is there. We have our laptops, our MacBook Pros, they all charge off USB-C nowadays, and I just want to see that in all our cameras across the board, regardless of whether it's a full-size cinema camera or something small like a mirrorless. Finally, and this might not be relevant to all filmmakers, but the FX6 just cannot take photos. And okay, this isn't something that's that important. You'll probably have another camera that can actually take really good stills, but it's just nice having the ability with a mechanical shutter to take decent stills with the FX3. They might only be 12 megapixels, but the image quality is brilliant. It's excellent image quality and certainly good enough for a lot of use cases, certainly on social media, online usage, and just having that ability built into the camera with you at all times is extremely useful in corporate shoots. Now, a little bonus one I'll just add on to all of this, which I didn't really include in the full list, and that's just the usability of the FX6. This is certainly a much more opinionated thing rather than actually something that I think you can fairly judge one or other. Some people will prefer the using of one camera over the other. For me, I just love the form factor of the FX3. I think it's the perfect size. The grip is a really nice size to use. I love how small, compact you can get it down to. I find the top handle really nice to use as well. Yes, it's a bit plasticky. I wish maybe the top piece could come off so that there's no risk of actually breaking it. But despite that, I do like the overall shape and build of this camera. I think it's got all the buttons you need in the right places. The FX6, it's just a little bit hefty to use. It's a little bit more fiddly. I do like the side handle. That is awesome. But the menus are more awkward to use. There's just things that, you know, are a bit more fiddly. Just going through things, doing autofocus is a bit more fiddly. It's just overall user experience, I personally would say, is nicer with the FX3. You combine that with all the things that I've discussed already, and overall, it's just a much nicer camera to use. Now, which camera do you prefer to use, or which camera would you pick up? For me, it's certainly the FX3. I will be sticking to one of these and maybe picking up another one in the future. The FX6, although it was interesting to try out, I don't think we'll be getting one anytime soon. Now, if you want to know more about the Sony FX3 and how we use it, check out all our other videos where I've discussed this camera and all the features that I love about it. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.